On the morning of March 27, 1992, firefighters in Kottayam, Kerala, were called to retrieve a body from a convent well. What seemed like a tragic suicide would become India's longest-running murder investigation, a case that would span 28 years, involve 13 CBI teams, destroy careers, silence witnesses, and expose how far powerful institutions will go to protect their secrets. But before the investigations, before the cover-ups, before the decades of legal battles, there was a moment, a single moment at 4:15 in the morning when a young nun walked into a kitchen for a glass of water. Sister Abhaya had woken early to study for her exams. She was 21 years old, a devout member of the Knanaya Catholic community, living at St. Pius X Convent while attending BCM College. Her roommate had woken her at 4 a.m. as requested. She studied for 15 minutes, then felt thirsty. It was an ordinary need, a simple journey she had made countless times before. She descended the stairs in the dark convent, crossed the ground floor, and opened the kitchen door. She went to the refrigerator, reached for water. And then she realized she was not alone. What Sister Abhaya witnessed in that kitchen would cost her her life. 2 people were there, engaged in activities that violated their religious vows, activities that would destroy careers and reputations if exposed. In the seconds it took for her to understand what she was seeing, her fate was sealed. Someone grabbed the small axe kept for chopping firewood. The first blow struck the back of her head. Then another. Then another. She collapsed, but didn't die. Hands wrapped around her neck, choking her as she clawed desperately at her own throat, leaving nail marks on both sides. The water bottle fell, her slippers scattered. Her veil tore away. They believed she was dead. They carried her unconscious body across the compound and dropped her into a 40-foot well. She may have still been alive when she hit the water, drowning in the darkness at the bottom of a shaft, 3 feet of water filling her lungs. It should have been simple. Make it look like suicide. Claim she was depressed, destroy the evidence, use institutional power to close the investigation quickly. And for a while, it worked. But then there was a thief named Adaka Raju, who was on the terrace that night, stealing copper wiring, who saw them and took note. The thief's presence on that early morning will add another dimension to this case. This is the story of Sister Abhaya, the young nun who died because she walked into a kitchen at the wrong moment. This is the Sister Abhaya case. Welcome to the crime series. Before we begin, do us a quick favor. Drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. We want to know where you're tuning in from, because these stories matter everywhere. Like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Beena Thomas was born on February 26, 1971, in Kottayam, Kerala, into a family of devout Catholics. Her childhood was marked by faith and modest circumstances. Her father, Matthew Thomas, worked as a low-wage farmer, struggling to provide for his family while maintaining his commitment to the church. Her mother, Leelama, supported the household and raised their children in the traditions of their faith. From an early age, Beena showed a deep interest in religious life. She began taking a serious interest in God and the Bible when she was only 5 or 6 years old. This wasn't the casual religiosity of a child mimicking adults, but a genuine calling that shaped her character and choices. Friends and family described her as polite, quiet, and incapable of hurting anyone or anything. The Thomas family was economically weak, but those who knew Beena saw something different. They saw a girl who found purpose and meaning in her faith, who viewed religious life not as an escape from poverty, but as a calling to serve something greater than herself. Growing up in Kottayam, Beena attended local schools where she proved to be a steady student. She wasn't at the top of her class, but she was reliable and hard-working. Her grades were good enough to pursue higher education, which in their economic circumstances was an achievement in itself. The decision to enter religious life meant that the church would support her education, providing opportunities her family might not otherwise afford. The Thomas family had relatives in Germany and Italy who were nuns. Young Beena admired the respect they received and the work they did. She told her brother that she wanted to be respected also and devote her life to Jesus. When her brother, Biju, suggested she finish her religious studies and come back home to get married, she laughed and told him that once she became a nun, there would be no turning back. In May 1990, at the age of 19, Beena Thomas took her vows and became Sister Abhaya. The name Abhaya means fearless in Sanskrit. She joined St. Joseph's Congregation for Religious Sisters under the Nanaya Catholic Archeparchy of Kottayam. Her commitment was genuine, her faith unwavering. She believed she was beginning a life of service and devotion. After taking her vows, Sister Abhaya enrolled in the pre-degree program at BCM College for Women in Kottayam, a church-run institution where she would study while living at the St. Pius X convent hostel. The arrangement was common for young nuns pursuing education. The convent provided a structured environment that combined religious observance with academic study. Sister Abhaya shared a room with other novices, including Sister Anupama and Sister Shirley. The young women formed bonds typical of dormitory life, studying together, attending prayers, and navigating the challenges of balancing religious duties with academic demands. Abhaya's roommates would later become crucial witnesses in the investigation into her death, though their testimony would prove complicated. Those who knew Sister Abhaya at the convent described her as sweet and innocent. She followed the rules, attended her classes, and participated in religious activities without complaint or controversy. The St. Pius X convent hostel housed 123 inmates in March 1992, including 20 nuns who supervised and guided the younger residents. The building followed a traditional design with multiple floors, dormitory-style rooms, common areas for meals and study, and the kitchen on the ground floor where residents could access food and water throughout the day and night. Religious life structured every aspect of daily routine. Morning prayers began before dawn, followed by Mass and breakfast. Students like Sister Abhaya attended college classes during the day, then returned for evening prayers, dinner, and study time. The schedule allowed little room for personal deviation, which is why Sister Abhaya's decision to wake at 4 a.m. to study for exams fit perfectly within acceptable behavior. The hostel's rules about male visitors were strict and clear. Priests who taught at the college could visit for official purposes, but these visits were expected to occur during daylight hours in public spaces. The presence of men in private areas or during nighttime hours violated fundamental protocols designed to protect both the residents and the reputation of the convent. Any breach of these rules required secrecy and the complicity of those who might witness it. Sister Abhaya had lived in this environment for 2 years by March 1992. She knew the routines, understood the expectations, and trusted the people around her. March 26, 1992, passed as an ordinary Thursday at St. Pius X convent. Students attended their classes at BCM College, returned for evening prayers, ate dinner, and settled into their study routines. Sister Abhaya had exams approaching and needed to prepare. The convent settled into its nighttime quiet. Most residents went to bed by 10 p.m., following the disciplined schedule that governed religious life. The building grew dark and still, with only minimal lighting left on for safety. The upper floors where the dormitory rooms were located became silent as young women slept, preparing for another day of classes and prayers. But this night would be different from all the others. Around 3:30 a.m., Adaka Raju arrived at the convent compound. The small-time thief had been watching the building for weeks. He had successfully stolen copper wiring from the lightning rod on the terrace twice before, selling the copper to a dealer named Shamir for good money. Tonight he planned his third theft from the same location. Raju entered the compound under cover of darkness, moving quietly to avoid detection. He scaled the building and made his way to the terrace. From his elevated position, he had a clear view of the compound and the building's rear staircase. As he began working to remove copper plates and wiring from the lightning rod, he saw 2 men moving near the rear entrance of the convent building. He was close enough to get a good look at one of them, though he did not know the man's identity. The men entered the building through the rear entrance, violating the strict rules about male presence in the women's hostel. Inside, They made their way to a ground-floor room. Behind closed doors, a man and a woman engaged in sexual activity that violated their religious vows. Raju continued his work on the terrace above, focused on his theft, unaware of what was happening inside the building below. On the upper floors, Sister Abhaya slept peacefully in her room. She had asked her roommate, Sister Shirley, to wake her at 4 a.m. so she could study for her exams. She had no idea that events were unfolding that would end her life within the hour. At 4 a.m., Sister Shirley woke Sister Abhaya, as requested. The young nun rose quietly, not wanting to disturb her roommate. She gathered her study materials and settled in to review for her exam. The convent remained dark and quiet around her. She studied for about 15 minutes, focusing on the material she needed to know. Then she felt thirsty. It was a simple, ordinary need. She decided to go down to the kitchen for water from the refrigerator. This was a normal activity, permitted at any hour for students who were studying. Sister Abhaya had made this journey many times before without incident. She stood up, left her room, and began walking toward the stairs. The building was dark except for minimal safety lighting. Sister Abhaya moved through the familiar spaces, her footsteps quiet on the floors. She descended the stairs, crossed the ground floor, and walked toward the kitchen, expecting nothing more than a quick trip to get water before returning to her studies. She opened the kitchen door and walked inside. She went to the refrigerator and opened it, the light from inside providing illumination in the dark room. She reached for a water bottle, and then she realized she was not alone. Sister Abhaya stood at the refrigerator, water bottle in hand, frozen in shock. 2 people were in the kitchen with her, engaged in activities she was never supposed to witness. She had stumbled into a secret that powerful people had worked hard to keep hidden. The moment of discovery lasted only seconds. Sister Abhaya knew what she had seen. Those in the kitchen knew she had seen them. The implications were clear to everyone. If Sister Abhaya reported this to church authorities, careers and reputations would be destroyed. Someone panicked. The small axe kept in the kitchen for chopping firewood was grabbed. The first blow struck Sister Abhaya on the back of the head, near her right ear. She had no time to scream. The second blow followed immediately. The third blow landed on top of her head. Sister Abhaya collapsed to the floor. But she was not dead. She struggled, hands wrapped around her neck, choking her. She reached up, clawing at the hands, fighting desperately for her life. Her fingernails left marks on both sides of her own neck as she tried to pull the hands away, but she was overpowered. The water bottle she had been holding fell to the floor, spilling its contents. One of her slippers came off during the struggle and slid under the refrigerator. The other was kicked aside. Her white veil was torn from her head. These items scattered across the kitchen floor, silent witnesses to the violence. Sister Abhaya went still. Her attackers believed she was dead. They had struck her hard enough to fracture her skull and create deep lacerations that bled across the kitchen floor. But medical evidence would later reveal she was still alive, unconscious but breathing, her heart still beating. Her killers now faced a choice. They could call for help and face the consequences. Or they could try to make this look like something else. They chose to cover up what they had done. They had to move the body. Working quickly, driven by fear and adrenaline, they carried Sister Abhaya through the ground floor, out a door, and across the compound toward the well. The early morning hour worked in their favor. The compound was dark and quiet. Most residents slept soundly on the upper floors. On the terrace above, Adaka Raju was still removing copper wiring, completely unaware that a murder had just occurred in the kitchen below him. By the time the attackers carried the body across the compound, Raju was focused on his theft and did not see them. At the well, they lifted Sister Abhaya's body. She may have still been alive at this moment, unconscious, with a fractured skull and strangled throat. But her heart, possibly still beating. They dropped her into the 40-foot shaft. The fall caused additional injuries, abrasions on her right shoulder and hip as her body struck the walls of the well on the way down. Sister Abhaya died there, at the bottom of the well, in 3 feet of water. She was 21 years old. The perpetrators returned to the kitchen. They were rushed and frightened. They left the water bottle on the floor. They failed to retrieve both slippers. They did not notice the white veil. These oversights would haunt them for decades. The kitchen showed clear signs of violence. The scattered items, the open refrigerator, the blood, the evidence of a struggle. It was obviously not a suicide. But the attackers hoped that a quick investigation would accept whatever story they told. They believed their positions of authority would protect them from serious scrutiny. As dawn approached, those who should not have been at the convent had to leave. They had to exit the compound and return to their normal lives before morning prayers began, and the building came alive with activity. They left hoping that Sister Abhaya's death would be quickly ruled a suicide and forgotten. In the dormitory rooms above, other nuns continued sleeping, unaware that a murder had occurred. Sister Shirley, who had woken Sister Abhaya at 4 a.m., had returned to sleep. She did not know that Abhaya would never return from her trip to get water. None of the other residents heard the struggle or the attack. The crime occurred in silence, hidden behind walls that were supposed to provide safety. The sun rose on March 27, 1992. Sister Abhaya lay at the bottom of the well, her body floating in the water. Morning prayers began at St. Pius X convent as usual, but Sister Abhaya was not among those gathered. Her absence was noted quickly. Roommates Sister Anupama and Sister Shirley realized she had not returned to their room after going to study. This was unusual enough to prompt concern. Young nuns did not simply vanish within the convent walls. A search began, methodical at first, but growing more urgent as the areas of the building were checked without finding her. Someone noticed the disarray in the kitchen, the open refrigerator, the spilled water, the scattered slippers. These details suggested something wrong, though no one yet understood their meaning. The search expanded to the grounds outside. Sister Abhaya's second slipper was found near the well in the compound. This discovery prompted someone to look into the well itself, though the depth and darkness made it difficult to see clearly. The fire department was called at approximately 10 a.m. to assist in searching the well. When firefighters arrived with equipment and began their work, they found what everyone had feared: a body at the bottom of the well. The retrieval took time and effort. Sister Abhaya's body had been in the water for hours. When it was finally brought to the surface, the young nun was clearly dead. Water dripped from her habit. Her face showed the trauma of her fall and drowning. The visible injuries on her head indicated violence, not an accident. Yet despite these obvious signs, the response from authorities would immediately move toward a predetermined conclusion. Sister Laishu, the Mother Superior of the convent, spoke with the fire brigade personnel. According to their reports, she suggested that Sister Abhaya had fallen into the well while operating the pump. This explanation made little logical sense. The well was not used for drinking water. There was no reason for a young nun to be operating any pump at 4 a.m. while supposedly studying for exams. The pump story contradicted both the physical evidence and common sense. Assistant Sub-Inspector V.V. Augustin from Kottayam West Police Station arrived at the scene. He was responsible for the initial investigation and the preparation of the first information report. Augustin photographed the body, collected evidence including Sister Abhaya's clothing, and prepared an inquest report. His observations should have raised immediate red flags about the suicide theory, and indeed his case diary would later show that he recorded the possibility of homicide. The body was transported to Kottayam Medical College, where Dr. Radhakrishnan performed the post-mortem examination. He documented abrasions on the right shoulder and hip, 2 lacerations above the right ear, and concluded that death resulted from drowning. However, he also noted the head injuries and did not definitively rule out the possibility that violence had occurred before the drowning. The medical evidence supported homicide, yet it would be interpreted to fit a suicide narrative. Meanwhile, a local photographer named Varghese Chako had been called to take close-up photographs of Sister Abhaya's body as part of the documentation process. Unlike Dr. Radhakrishnan, Chako noticed nail marks on both sides of the victim's neck. These marks suggested strangulation or choking, injuries that would be nearly impossible to inflict on oneself before jumping into a well. Chaco documented what he saw, creating a photographic record that would later become crucial evidence despite the autopsy doctor's failure to note these same injuries. The physical evidence collected that day told a clear story of violence. The scattered slippers, the open refrigerator, the spilled water, the veil caught on a door, the head injuries, and the nail marks all pointed toward a struggle and an assault. Yet within hours, the official narrative began crystallizing around suicide. This rapid shift from investigation to conclusion suggested external pressure to close the case quickly. News of Sister Abhaya's death spread through Kottayam. Within the Knanaya Catholic community, reactions were mixed. Some accepted the suicide explanation, viewing it as a tragic personal crisis. Others immediately questioned the official story. The physical evidence didn't match the suicide theory. The circumstances made no sense. Why would a young nun preparing for exams suddenly decide to end her life? The crime scene in the kitchen remained visible to the convent residents. They had all seen the disturbance, the scattered items, the signs that something violent had occurred. But as investigators began pushing the suicide narrative, pressure mounted on these witnesses to align their memories with the official story. What they had seen with their own eyes began to be reinterpreted or forgotten. Within days, crucial evidence began disappearing. Sister Abhaya's diary, which might have provided insights into her relationships and state of mind, was destroyed. Her clothing from the night of her death vanished before proper forensic examination could be conducted. The axe that had allegedly been used as a weapon was never properly secured or analyzed. This destruction of evidence was not accidental, but deliberate, suggesting that someone wanted to prevent certain facts from coming to light. The local police investigation concluded quickly, perhaps too quickly. Within days of Sister Abhaya's death, the working theory focused on suicide, despite evidence that contradicted this explanation. The speed of this conclusion raised questions about whether investigators were actually examining evidence or simply accepting what they were told by convent authorities. The suicide theory faced immediate resistance from Jomon Puthanpurakal, a human rights activist who recognized the inconsistencies within days of the death. He formed the Sister Abhaya Case Action Council on March 31, 1992, just 4 days after her body was found. Puthanpurakal noted the overturned fruit basket, the scattered slippers, the open refrigerator, and the spilled water bottle as clear evidence of a struggle. Despite political connections between Kerala's leadership and the Catholic Church that favored closing the case quietly, Puthanpurakal organized protests, filed petitions with everyone from the chief minister to the president, and built a relationship with Sister Abhaya's father, Matthew Thomas. The poor farmer became a symbol of the quest for justice, traveling hours by bus to demand answers about his daughter's death. 67 nuns from Abhaya's own congregation supported the activism, adding credibility to claims that something sinister had occurred. If you're finding this story as compelling as we did researching it, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Stories like Sister Abhaya's survive because people refuse to let them be forgotten. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these untold cases to light. Now, let's continue with what happened after Thomas's dramatic resignation. The crime branch took over from local police on April 13, 1992, but instead of conducting a genuine investigation, they reinforced the suicide narrative. Their January 30, 1993 report added psychological illness claims to the existing fabricated profile of Abhaya. This should have ended the matter, but Puthanpurakal's activism forced the Kerala government to request CBI involvement. On March 29, 1993, the CBI formally registered the case and assigned Deputy Superintendent Vagesi P. Thomas to lead the investigation. Thomas conducted a methodical investigation and within 6 months concluded definitively that Sister Abhaya had been murdered. He recorded this finding in the case diary based on the nail marks indicating strangulation, the head injuries showing significant force, and the kitchen disturbance inconsistent with suicide planning. However, his supervisor V. Thiagarajan pressured him to change his conclusion to suicide. When Thomas refused to falsify official records, he faced an impossible choice between professional integrity and his career. On December 30, 1993, he resigned with 7 years remaining before retirement. On January 19, 1994, he held a press conference explaining that his conscience would not permit compliance with directives to record Sister Abhaya's death as suicide. His dramatic sacrifice proved that powerful forces were obstructing the investigation from within the CBI itself. After Thomas's resignation, the case saw 13 different CBI teams over 15 years, producing 3 contradictory final reports. The first report in November 1996 couldn't determine if the death was suicide or homicide. The second report in July 1999 confirmed homicide, but couldn't identify perpetrators, vindicating Thomas's original conclusion. The third report in August 2005 backed away entirely, suggesting no one could be held responsible. Each report was rejected by the Chief Judicial Magistrates Court in Ernakulam, which refused to let the case close despite CBI requests. The court recognized that investigative difficulty didn't justify abandonment when evidence clearly pointed to murder. The CBI conducted unusual experiments on April 7, 1995, using a full-sized dummy, matching Sister Abhaya's measurements to test how she ended up in the well. 3 forensic experts analyzed these tests and concluded on April 17, 1995, that homicide could not be ruled out, finding the suicide theory physically implausible. The CBI announced arrests were imminent, but none followed. This pattern of promising breakthroughs that led nowhere fueled suspicions of external interference. The forensic evidence became a battlefield where every piece was contested, every expert opinion challenged by competing opinions, deliberately complicating what should have been straightforward conclusions from the dummy tests and medical evidence. By September 2008, the Sister Abhaya case had been under investigation for over 16 years. 4 different CBI reports had been rejected by the courts. Public frustration was mounting. The Kerala High Court decided to take direct action, issuing an order on September 4, 2008, that would change the trajectory of the investigation. The High Court transferred responsibility for the case from the CBI's Delhi unit to the agency's Kerala branch in Kochi. This transfer brought the investigation closer to the location of the crime and potentially allowed for more focused attention from investigators who understood local dynamics. The court also imposed a deadline. The CBI's Kerala unit had 3 months to complete the investigation and produce results. The 3-month deadline was ambitious, perhaps unrealistically so, given the case's history. But it sent a clear message. The court's patience had run out. 16 years of investigations that produced multiple reports, but no arrests was unacceptable. The High Court wanted definitive action, not more ambiguous conclusions and requests to close the case. On November 1, 2008, Deputy Superintendent Nanda Kumaran Nair took charge of the investigation. Nair was an experienced officer with a reputation for thorough work. He inherited boxes of files, witness statements, forensic reports, and investigative dead ends accumulated over 16 years. His task was to find something previous teams had missed or failed to pursue. Nair took a different approach than his predecessors. Rather than focusing solely on physical evidence and forensic debates, he concentrated on witness testimony and establishing who had been present at the convent on the night of March 27, 1992. If this was murder, the killers had to be people with access to the convent and motive to prevent Sister Abhaya from revealing something she had witnessed. One of Nair's early actions was recording the statement of Sanju P. Matthew, who lived adjacent to the convent. Matthew had information that previous investigators had not adequately pursued. He told Nair that he had seen Father Thomas Couture at the convent hostel campus on the night of March 26, 1992, the night before Sister Abhaya was found dead. This statement was recorded under Section 164 of the Criminal Procedure Code, giving it special legal weight. Matthew's testimony provided something the investigation had lacked, a specific individual placed at the scene at the relevant time. Father Couture had no legitimate reason to be at the women's hostel late at night. His presence there violated convent rules and suggested he was engaged in activities he wanted to keep secret. This statement gave Nair a concrete lead to pursue. Naya also reviewed previous witness statements, looking for patterns and inconsistencies. He noticed that several witnesses had provided detailed information to earlier investigators, but had never been pushed to follow up on implications. Some witnesses had seen things or heard things that they did not fully understand at the time, but that took on new meaning when examined systematically. The investigation began focusing on the theory that Sister Abhaya had witnessed something on the night of March 26th or the early morning of March 27th that led to her murder. The most logical explanation was that she had encountered Father Couture and someone else engaged in conduct that violated their vows of celibacy. If Abhaya threatened to report what she had seen, they would have strong motivation to silence her. Naya identified Sister Sephi as a person of interest. She was the warden responsible for the hostel where Sister Abhaya died. Sephi's room was on the ground floor, near the kitchen where the murder allegedly occurred. Her position gave her authority over who entered the building and what activities happened within it. If Father Couture was making unauthorized nighttime visits, Sephi would have been in a position to facilitate those visits, or at least to know about them. The investigation also examined Father Jose Puthrakayil's role. Like Couture, Puthrakayil taught at BCM College and had professional reasons to visit the convent during normal hours. But witnesses reported seeing him at the convent at unusual times as well. The pattern suggested that both priests had access to the convent beyond what their official duties required. On November 18, 2008, just 17 days before the High Court's 3-month deadline expired, something significant happened that would strengthen the case against one of the suspects. Medical evidence was about to emerge that would change the investigation dramatically. On November 19, 2008, the CBI arrested 3 people: Father Thomas Couture, Father Jose Puthrakayil, and Sister Sephi. These arrests, coming 16 years after Sister Abhaya's death, represented a breakthrough that many thought would never occur. The arrests created shockwaves through Kerala's Catholic community and beyond. After 16 years of failed investigations, someone was finally being held accountable for Sister Abhaya's murder. But who were these 3 people? What positions had they held? What power had protected them for so long? Understanding the accused required examining their backgrounds, their roles within the institution, and how they came to be in a position where murder became possible. The first of the accused was Father Thomas Couture, born into a prominent family within the Knanaya Catholic community. Father Thomas Couture was born into a prominent family within the Knanaya Catholic community. By the time Sister Abhaya arrived at BCM College, Couture had built a reputation that extended far beyond his role as a psychology professor. He served as secretary to the bishop and would eventually rise to become chancellor of the Kottayam diocese, positions that placed him at the center of the church's administrative power structure. Students at BCM College knew Father Couture as an imposing figure. Couture exhibited behavior that made female students uncomfortable. He would stare intently at their feet, a detail that painted a picture of someone who abused his position of authority. Yet despite these concerns, no formal complaints were ever filed. The culture within the church-run institution discouraged students from speaking out against ordained clergy. Couture's dual role as both educator and church administrator gave him significant influence. He taught psychology, a subject that required trust and vulnerability from students. Sister Abhaya sat in his classes, learning about the human mind from a man who, according to later allegations, harbored secrets that contradicted his vows of celibacy. The power dynamic was clear. Couture was untouchable, protected by his position and the institutional authority of the church. His residence was not at the convent, which made his alleged presence there on the night of March 27, 1992, particularly significant. According to witness testimony, Couture had been seen entering the convent compound at odd hours on multiple occasions. These visits violated convent rules and raised questions about what drew him to the women's hostel after dark. When Sister Abhaya died, Father Couture was one of the first people Professor Thrasiama noticed at the convent. When he was finally arrested on November 19, 2008, Father Couture was 60 years old. He had spent 16 years watching investigations come and go, watching the case almost close multiple times, watching as witnesses died or changed their stories. His arrest was a shock, but he maintained his innocence. But Father Couture did not act alone. The second person arrested that morning occupied a very different position within the church hierarchy, yet the CBI believed the two were intimately connected in both the crime and the cover-up that followed. Sister Sephi lived a very different life from Father Couture, yet their paths would become fatally intertwined. As the de facto in charge of the St. Pius X convent hostel, she held responsibility for the well-being and conduct of the young women living there. Her room was located on the ground floor, conveniently close to the kitchen, where Sister Abhaya would meet her end. Born in the early 1960s, Sephi had taken her vows and committed to a life of service within the Knanaya Catholic community. By 1992, she was approximately 29 years old, young enough to relate to the students, but old enough to command respect. The position of hostel warden gave her authority over daily operations, including monitoring who entered and left the building. The role should have made her a protector of the young women in her care. Instead, according to the investigation that would unfold years later, Sephi allegedly used her position to facilitate activities that violated her vows and endangered her charges. The ground floor location of her room, which should have served as a security feature, instead provided privacy for activities that needed to be hidden. When Sister Sephi was arrested on November 19, 2008, she was 46 years old. She had spent 16 years as a free woman after participating in Sister Abhaya's murder. She too maintained her innocence, and her lawyers would argue vigorously that the evidence against her was insufficient to support a conviction. The arrests that morning included a third person, another priest whose role in the events of March 27, 1992, would prove the most controversial and ultimately the most difficult to establish. Father Jose Puthrikail taught Malayalam at BCM College, making him a colleague of both Father Couture and Sister Abhaya. His role in the events of March 27, 1992, would remain controversial throughout the investigation. Puthrikail was described by colleagues as someone who behaved as if he was the caretaker of the convent following Sister Abhaya's death. This behavior struck observers as unusual, since he held no official role in convent administration. His presence and his actions on that morning raised questions about his level of involvement and knowledge. The November 19, 2008 arrests of Father Thomas Couture, Father Jose Puthrikail, and Sister Sephi marked the first time anyone had been formally charged in Sister Abhaya's murder. The CBI moved quickly, conducting raids early in the morning to take all three accused into custody simultaneously. Within hours, they were being processed through the criminal justice system, facing charges of murder, destruction of evidence, and criminal conspiracy. The basis for the arrests included witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and results from narco-analysis tests conducted in August 2007. These narco-analysis sessions had involved administering truth serum to the three accused and questioning them while they were in a sedated state. The tapes from these sessions allegedly contained confessions about what happened on the night of March 27, 1992. However, the narco-analysis evidence was controversial from the start. In September 2009, tapes purporting to be from these sessions were leaked to Kairali TV, a local television station. The tapes showed the suspects describing events from the night of the murder while under sedation. The videos were uploaded to YouTube, making them available to the public and creating a media sensation. The authenticity of these tapes was immediately questioned. Justice K. Hema of the Kerala High Court, who would later hear the bail petition for the accused, expressed concern that the CDs might have been manipulated. She ordered the CBI to produce the original recordings. The controversy deepened when Dr. Malini, the assistant director of the Bangalore facility where the narco-analysis was conducted, was dismissed from service for forging her birth certificates, raising questions about her credibility. Ultimately, in February 2020, the Kerala High Court ruled that narco-analysis and brain mapping results could not be used as evidence. This followed a 2010 Supreme Court ruling that such tests conducted without the subject's consent violated constitutional rights. The exclusion of this evidence weakened the prosecution's case significantly. But the CBI had more than narco-analysis results. They had Sanju P. Matthews' statement placing Father Couture at the convent on the critical night. They had the crime scene evidence of a struggle in the kitchen. They had the forensic medical expert opinions that Sister Abhaya's death was homicide, not suicide. And they had one more witness whose testimony would prove absolutely crucial: Adaka Raju. Adaka Raju earned his nickname from stealing areca nuts. He was, by his own admission, a professional thief who targeted buildings for their copper wiring and other valuable materials he could sell. On the night of March 26, 1992, Raju had broken into the compound of St. Pius X Convent with the intention of stealing copper plates from the lightning rod on the terrace. This was his third such theft from the convent. The previous two had been successful. While positioned on the terrace working to remove copper wiring around 3:30 a.m., Raju saw two men approaching the staircase at the rear of the convent building. He was close enough to get a good look at one of them, though he did not know the man's identity at the time. Years later, when Father Couture's arrest made news, Raju saw his photograph in newspapers and recognized him as one of the men he had seen that night. Raju's testimony was devastating to the defense. He was an eyewitness who could place Father Couture at the scene during the time frame when Sister Abhaya was murdered. The defense worked hard to discredit him, arguing that a thief had no credibility and suggesting he was a witness planted by the prosecution. They pointed out that Raju's criminal background made him untrustworthy. But Raju had something more powerful than a clean record, a consistent story, and a credible explanation for why he was there. He admitted his criminal purpose openly, never trying to make himself look better than he was. He explained that the crime branch had detained him for 58 days after Sister Abhaya's death, torturing him to extract a false confession that he had murdered her. He testified that officials had tried to frame him, offering him 2 lakh, approximately 2,400, and promising his wife a government job if he would admit to the killing. Raju refused these offers. Despite torture, despite bribes totaling crores of rupees according to some reports, despite threats, he maintained that while he had been at the convent to steal, he had not killed anyone. He told investigators what he had seen: two men, one of whom he later identified as Father Couture, entering the convent building late at night. His statement was recorded, but for years it went nowhere as the CBI failed to act on the information. When the case finally came to trial in 2019, Raju appeared in court and repeated his testimony under oath. The defense attorneys, some of whom were senior advocates, subjected him to aggressive cross-examination. They tried to break his story or find inconsistencies. They attacked his character and credibility. Raju, a simple man with little education, faced some of India's top legal minds, determined to discredit him. He stood firm. The trial judge, K. Sanilkumar, would later write in his verdict that Raju might have been a thief, but he was also an honest man and a speaker of truth. The judge noted that Raju had no reason to lie about what he had seen. His statement placed him at a crime scene engaged in criminal activity. No one fabricating testimony would admit to being there to commit theft. Raju explained his motivation simply. He was a father of 3 daughters. When he saw what had happened to Sister Abhaya, he thought of his own children. He wanted justice for her, as he would want justice for his daughters if something similar happened to them. This basic human decency, coming from someone society dismissed as a criminal, provided a moral foundation for the case that contrasted sharply with the behavior of ordained clergy. On January 1, 2009, just 6 weeks after the arrests, Justice K. Hema granted conditional bail to all 3 accused. This would be the first of many legal battles over whether they should remain in custody while the case proceeded. The CBI officially filed charges on July 17, 2009, listing 177 witnesses, but the trial didn't begin until August 26, 2019, that is 27 years after the murder. This extraordinary delay meant crucial witnesses had died, including Sister Abhaya's parents in 2016, just before they could see justice. Of the 177 witnesses listed, only 49 testified, and 8 to 9 turned hostile during trial. The pattern of witness intimidation was systematic. Sister Anupama, Abhaya's roommate, who had reported seeing slippers in the kitchen and hearing strange noises, retracted everything. Sister Shirley, who woke Abhaya at 4 a.m. and found the disturbed kitchen, denied her statements. Sanju P. Matthew, who placed Father Couture at the convent that night, claimed his statement was inaccurate. Most telling was Achama, a kitchen supervisor who challenged CBI testing in the Supreme Court, represented by prominent lawyer Harish Salve, later admitting someone else paid her legal expenses without identifying who. The consistent pattern clearly showed external pressure from powerful interests protecting the accused. However, critical witnesses held firm. Professor Thriziyama testified despite threats about seeing Couture at the convent and his inappropriate behavior. Doctors Lalithambika Karunakaran and P. Rema maintained their findings that Sister Sifi underwent hymenoplasty before arrest to conceal sexual activity. Photographer Varghese Chako stood by his documentation of nail marks on Abhaya's neck. Most crucially, Adaka Raju withstood aggressive cross-examination, repeating his account of seeing Couture enter the convent. The judge later praised Raju as honest, noting his admission of being there to steal enhanced, rather than diminished his credibility. Despite massive witness intimidation, enough testimony and physical evidence survived for prosecution to proceed. On December 26, 2020, Special CBI Judge K. Sanilkumar delivered his verdict in the packed Thiruvananthapuram courtroom after 28 years. His detailed 229-page judgment found Father Thomas Couture guilty of murder, destruction of evidence, and house trespass, while Sister Sefi was convicted of murder and destruction of evidence. On motive, the judge concluded Abhaya accidentally encountered the accused in a compromising position at 4:15 a.m., leading Sister Sefi to panic and attack with the kitchen axe, while Father Couture participated in the assault and disposal of the body. Though acknowledging the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, he found the circumstances formed a complete chain pointing toward guilt. The judge also criticized the initial police and crime branch investigations. Finding evidence was deliberately destroyed and aspects of the suicide story fabricated. On December 23, 2020, Judge Sanilkumar announced sentencing. The prosecution requested the death penalty, arguing this fell into the rarest of rare category because it involved betrayal of trust by a teacher and warden who had duties to safeguard Abhaya, yet murdered her to protect their secrets. Defense attorneys pleaded for leniency, noting Couture was 71 with cancer and diabetes, while Sefi had aged parents depending on her. The judge rejected the death penalty and imposed life imprisonment on both under Section 302, along with fines of 5 lakh rupees each. For destruction of evidence, both received 7 years rigorous imprisonment and fines of 50,000 rupees. Father Couture received an additional life sentence and fine of 1 lakh rupees for house trespass, with all sentences running concurrently. Both began serving sentences immediately in separate prisons. However, the story didn't end there. Both filed appeals to the Kerala High Court challenging their convictions on grounds of insufficient evidence, and in early 2021 filed applications for suspension of sentence pending appeal. On June 23, 2022, a division bench consisting of Justices K. Vinod Chandran and C. Jayachandran made a controversial decision suspending the life sentences and granting conditional bail with bonds of 5 lakh rupees each, and prohibition from leaving Kerala without permission. The High Court's decision was based on concerns about evidence, with Justice Chandran writing the prosecution had not effectively countered defense arguments on prima facie examination. The court questioned reliance on the photographer's testimony over the autopsy doctor's report, expressed concern about relying heavily on circumstantial evidence, raised doubts about Adaka Raju's credibility as a confessed thief, pointed out limited evidence directly linking Couture to the scene, and expressed skepticism about the hymenoplasty evidence. The bail decision devastated those who had fought for justice. Jomon Puthan Parakal publicly criticized the CBI for not filing an effective counter-affidavit to the bail application despite 18 months passing since the appeals were filed, announcing plans to file complaints about the agency's failure. Biju Thomas expressed disappointment, but maintained hope the ultimate appeal would uphold the conviction. Father Kotor and Sister Sefi were released from prison after serving approximately 19 months of their life sentences, and as of 2025, their appeals remain pending before the Kerala High Court. This case represents both the success and failure of India's justice system. On one hand, the truth was eventually established. A trial court examined the evidence, heard testimony, and concluded that Sister Abhaya was murdered by Father Kotor and Sister Sefi on March 27, 1992, because she had discovered their sexual relationship. This official finding vindicated the activists, family members, and witnesses who had insisted for 28 years that Sister Abhaya did not commit suicide. On the other hand, the convicts are free. They live in Kerala, subject to travel restrictions but otherwise able to conduct normal lives while their appeals proceed. The appeals process could take years. Even if the conviction is upheld, Father Kotor is now in his mid-70s with serious health conditions. The practical consequences of any eventual imprisonment may be minimal. As Father Kotor and Sister Sefi await the outcome of their appeals, Sister Abhaya remains in her grave in Kottayam. She was 21 years old when she died, killed for the crime of accidentally witnessing something she should not have seen. Her death exposed secrets that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. The truth has been established. Whether justice will ultimately be served remains an open question. If this documentary opened your eyes to a case that deserves more attention, please subscribe to this channel and share this video. Stories like Sister Abhaya's need to be told, remembered, and discussed.